T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Vincentions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of Let's Get Down to Business. I'm live in the studios of IKTV and I have on my panel this week Miss Beatrice Elias. She is the Executive Director of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce in Haiti. I will soon be joined by Lizra Fabian. She is the Executive Director of the Dominica Association of Industry and Commerce. I also have Mr. Joseph Sheridan, better known as Joe Sheridan. He is here with us in St. Vincent. He is a chartered insurance practitioner. Co-hosting this evening with me, as usual, I have Maurice Franklin, who's here in St. Vincent, and somebody joining me from Taiwan in the person of Tifisha Tellisford. Tifisha, it's 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning there for her. So we got her up early. She's part of the production team. So welcome. Our topic this week is on disaster risk reduction and business continuity. And it's timely because we just witnessed, most of us, the passage of Hurricane Elsa. Fortunately, not much incident. So we want to get right into the program, and I am going to start looking at risk identification. Risk identification, and I want to know from my panel, where does the private sector get its information on identification of disaster risk? Where do we go for that information? I'm going to start off with Beatrice. Let's hear what happens in Haiti. How does your private sector get informed about the identification of risk?
Hi, Tony, and hi, everyone. Thank you, Tifisha, for being with us so early on Taiwan clock. So in Haiti, we do have an association, which is an alliance for risk management and activity continuity. The name of the association is AJACA. They are the one everybody reaches out to get information, and they usually send emails on regular basis, and they're also on social media. They are the one gathering all the information.
And do you think that your private sector there find it adequate? Are there any gaps you think in the way the information flows?
Well, the thing is that, Tony, I think that you always can do better. And the thing is, in Haiti, we don't have the structure for many things. So most of the time, the private sector try to do its best in many sectors and many domains. So maybe they don't pay attention to AJACA as they should, and they don't give AJACA the support they should give them, I think.
Yeah, I just want to sort of get into the structure of what you call AJACA. How is it a partnership, or is it just strictly government based? Is it made up of many subcommittees that have all the social partners involved?
It's only members of the private sectors. They
Oh,
work, yes, they work with the public sector because they're in contact with the civil protection institution here. So they are the link with the public sector in that domain, but they are members of private sectors.
I see. It's a slightly different structure here. Well, very different. Joe, I think maybe you'd want to speak to that in terms of being in the private sector, where we get our information on disaster risk.
Sure.
Talking about
Okay.
risk identification.
Right. Thanks, Tony. I loved what Beatrice was saying there about the Alliance for Risk Management Information. We don't have such an organization here. We get our information obviously from all the various government ministries who are involved in that kind of activity, but particularly NEMO. But from the insurance sector, we get it from our own professional experience on a global basis. And of course, there is a lot of local risk management information. People have knowledge of histories of areas around the country susceptible to different things. So we have all of that. Now, we also have the Insurance Association, which is the Insurance Association of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the association is charged with representing the interests of the insurance sector with government, and therefore would be a focal point for the working between the private sector, the private insurance sector, and government in that regard.
And perhaps we can look at the government entity, the state entity that doesn't necessarily deal with risk management as it relates to the private sector. But generally, they are I'm talking about our NEMO here. I don't know what the equivalent is in Haiti, the National Emergency Management Committee. The National Emergency Management Organization. I don't know what the equivalent is in Haiti, but how do we see that entity functioning in terms of the quality of information about sticking with the topic of risk identification?
Right. NEMO has improved tremendously in recent times. There was a time which I'm sure people will recognize that it was a reactive organization, rather like SIDERA was. Now SIDERA has changed to SEDIMA, but recently NEMO has improved greatly, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of proactive information coming out on a regular basis.
And in Haiti, Beatrice?
On a regular basis, on the ground, you have, for the public sector, you have what they call the civil protection. And for example, for ELISA, they had activated the Center of National Operation, meaning that they have people on the ground. They have actually 3,000 officers working for civil protection. And whenever there's a problem and there's certain area that you cannot get to, they have motorcycles, they can walk by, they can do everything that anybody else cannot do. So as a public sector, they have an entity, they have an institution, but like I said, they're not out there. So that's the problem. And thank God we have AGIRCA who can do the relay for the information, and whenever they need equipment or they need help, AGIRCA does the relay for them. So I would say that the civil protection is for the public institution, but AGIRCA is the alliance of private sector members that do the relay for us.
Okay, well, great. Maurice and Tifisha, I think Tifisha being a Vincentian, you're living in Taiwan, so you've got maybe a sampling of both the Vincentian experience and what it is like in Taiwan. It'll be interesting to hear your perspective as we go along. But Maurice, where you sit, what's your sense in terms of the identification of risk, as far as, because before we talk about risk reduction, we have to identify what the major threats are. So how do you think we stand in St. Vincent?
I think we're doing the best we can. I mean, we get the regular updates from NEMO. I know particularly with the chamber, you try to ensure that the business community has access to the information and in a timely manner, as timely as possible. And you have to remember, I mean, if we're thinking of natural disasters within our context, they
Correct.
evolve very quickly. So even in terms of prediction of the disasters, it would be very difficult to predict very accurately what's going to happen and what the effects are going to be.
What do you sense in Taiwan about our experience, Tifisha? Because it's interesting to see one or hear one's perspective when they're overseas listening in.
I think so far, NEMO and all the relevant organizations are doing the best that they can. I do see that in Taiwan, information is shared more quickly, but they also have better technology. So I think technology is one of the major factors in how we can know the disasters in a timely manner and share the information in a timely manner as well. And that does help when you have good technology for prediction and sharing of information.
So just to remind our viewers and followers that we're waiting on Isra Fabian, who's in Dominica. She'll join us shortly, I hope. Morales, you have to keep looking to see if she's in the room so you can let her in. In terms of making better business decisions, Joe, I know you probably want to weigh in heavily on this one. The information with regards to risk identification, assuming we have identified our threats, do you think the private sector responds in a way where they are making better decisions, given the quality of information that they have, better management decisions, better decisions in terms of continuity? And we're gonna discuss that in length.
I'm sure they are, because it must be given that you can never have enough information. What you do with it makes the difference between success and failure, and so we can never have enough information. So I think that I mentioned in passing reference to the Insurance Association of SVG. One of the things that we can see would be more consultation is needed, not just with the insurance sector, but with the private sector. Find out what the problems are that the private sector is facing as well, because although we're talking of disasters in a way, we shouldn't just be talking of natural disasters. There are all sorts of other disasters. Look at what happened in Sweden, I think it was, with the cyber crash and the cyber crime, wasn't that right?
Cybercrime, yes.
That's a disaster for that sector of Sweden. So there are all sorts of risks that all of us are facing, and we need to maybe have more interaction and more consultation so that we can understand the risks that the private sector is facing.
And Beatrice, it's an interesting point that Joe raises there in terms of the type of risk we identify, because you're having some sort of political unrest in Haiti, which you may want to speak to, and how does that affect, the way business is done. But overall, just what is your sense of the decision-making process that the private sector engages in, given the information that they have about, the risk factors that have been identified?
Well, unfortunately, Tony, I would say that too many of them don't have a business continuity plan, and this is sad. And we've seen it after the earthquake, we've seen it after a hurricane, we've seen it after Matthew, we've seen it last year with the pandemic and the fact that we were confined and we had to work from home, and everybody had to adapt and adjust themselves. But the problem, Tony, is that if those big companies they export, so they have rules and regulation to follow. So they have a minimum of structure, and they have a slight business continuity plan, and they can respond to an event or a disaster in a few hours or in a few days, within a few matters, within a few days, but they're not, I cannot say that they're ready, unfortunately. If they don't depend on Better Work or ILO, the Organization of Labor, they don't have that business continuity plan. It's sad to see that they don't learn. It is sad. If they're not big companies, unfortunately, most of them don't have a business continuity plan. And they
Joe,
don't.
Is that a question of resources? And Joe, you're an insurance man, so it costs, I think, to plan for continuity and put things in place for continuity. And so is there a tendency to gamble with that, not increase the cost base of running their business?
I think there's a tendency to gamble. Yes, certainly that's in all of us. But in reality, the cost of producing a business continuity plan is literally just common sense. You look at your own business. I mean, I'm happy to talk about ours later on, our own business plan, and to summarize it for the benefit of everybody. But it means really looking at the risks that we face, identifying the risks, identifying them in priority, and think wide and not just think of the ones that come to mind automatically, and then think, how will we be affected? And so it's literally talking yourself through what could happen, and it's easy to prepare. You can take them off the internet, I'm sure, as well. So I wouldn't have thought that cost would be a factor. I would think it's probably that the thought that, well, it's not going to happen to us, it'll happen to other people. But of course, we know it does happen to us from time to time. One of the things, though, that could help a lot more is we know that all governments, whether it be in Haiti and Dominica or here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they collect information, they collect data. And here I'm talking about things like hazard mapping. I'm using that as an obvious example for all of us. It would be great if all this information was shared freely, accessed freely, with no delays, no problems, no form filling in and all the rest of it, to get this information out so that the whole of society could be alert to the risks that are in their area. That's mainly natural hazards. But
Tifisha made the point about data collection and, the point about technology. Is it that we're not using, up-to-date technology to make it easier to collect information, Joe? Because the idea of, filling out long survey forms and that sort of thing is probably a turn off, eh?
Sure. No, I was thinking more of the fact that many government departments in their natural course would collect this information, and it would be great if it could be shared freely and maybe published to the public, so that those who need to know can get that information and work on it, make use of it. I mean, I'm sure Tony and Afisha would remember, and Maurice, there are certain areas in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that are known for certain natural hazards, let's call it. For example, Belmont comes to mind, where you have constant risk of landslides. Bookermont, the river that floods there. And remember Gibson Corner, there was a collapse risk some years ago. So things like that. There must be other areas like that all over our respective countries. And it would be great if that information is shared freely and publicly so that everyone knows about it, instead of maybe waiting till something happens.
It's a very valid point. I think it's timely now that I introduce Lizra Fabian, who's just joined us from Dominica. Lizra is the executive director of the Association of Industry and Commerce there in Dominica. Welcome, Lizra.
Tony,
thanks
for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here to speak with your listeners.
Thanks for joining us. I know you were at a Rotary function, and Joe was excited to hear that. Lizra, I'm going to get you to jump straight in. What's the hazard mapping like in Dominica, going straight to Joe's point, and is information shared throughout the length and breadth of Dominica, and in particular, is the private sector in Dominica privy to all the information about hazards? Is it shared in an effective way?
I would say for Dominica, information is always important to have more information. But in our experience from the previous weather events that we've had, Tropical Storm Erika, Hurricane Maria, and other events, we get to learn more of what's happening and more information comes to the fore. There's also historical information that has been shared. Maybe if someone lives in a community, someone knows that in this area, probably we shouldn't build in that area. But I still think that enough information isn't shared and accessed by the general public because...
So I'm getting a sense that there isn't a systematic way, which is what Joe was talking about, in mapping hazards.
It is being mapped, and I know the government is working on doing that. And even through the chamber, we are working with USRIs on trying to identify our even critical assets so that we know what decisions we need to make. But it's not done in a systematic way currently.
Beatrice, I'm going to throw it quickly to you, and then I'm going to ask Maurice and Tifisha if they want to jump in with any questions. So, Beatrice, in terms of the hazard mapping.
There's not really anything being done on a regular basis. Like I said, it's only when they have something going on, then everybody get into it and do survey, or we have from time to time we have the results of when there are movements, when there are quakes and shakes from time to time. But besides that, there's nothing really into place. There's no mapping.
Good. Tifisha, Maurice, anything for our panelists?
I would like to know, what do you think should be done in terms of better data collection and sharing of this information with all the parties involved? Like, because as the chambers, and Joseph, you are in insurance, you should have some ideas about what you see on an everyday basis and the needs that comes to mind. So what would you like to see in terms of collecting the information and sharing the information, and what kind of ideas you think could be implemented?
Sure. Thanks, Tifisha. I mean, in this modern age, the first thing that I thought of was putting things on websites, for example, so that it's available for everybody. But if you're let's say you're a farmer in North Leeward, you're not necessarily going to be someone who checks government websites for various ministries to find updated information. So there has to be a more public way. Programs like this, of course, will bring things out, but the newspapers are quite a good source, because there is still a feeling that when Friday comes round, you have to buy your newspaper and see what's up to date. So it's an opportunity to get things into the hands of many people who wouldn't maybe have internet access all the time. So there's that route. I'm sure the Insurance Association, if the information came to us, we would find a way to disseminate it, because I'm actually the PRO of the Insurance Association this year, and that is one of the roles that I would be charged with, to make sure that information, when we receive it, is shared with the public. So if the Insurance Association, for example, gets risk management information, we would want to spread it out to everybody by all possible means. And we would use all the modern means, as well as the Facebooks and social media and all the other everyday things which are now taken for granted by many people. But websites, where I started, I don't think would be the only answer for sure.
And Maurice, you want to jump in with anything here?
Well, could
I actually...
Sure. Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry.
I think it was a really good question, because it helps us to think, even as associations, what can we do to help to improve the information flow? And I think ensuring that the representative bodies have a seat at the table, so they can represent the interests of their community, so that the correct data is collected. So the chamber would have a seat at the table. ensuring that whenever the government decides they want to collect data, we get to provide our input into that, so it can really look at the needs of the people. The information flow or the information collected would be able to benefit the people we represent. And imagine if all representative bodies, associations, whether in insurance, banking, small businesses, whatever it is, whichever part of our communities, I think that will help in the reporting part of the information. But it's a great thing that if it's just on a website, persons will not be able to access it. But if the representative bodies who are active get the information, make it to their bodies at the appropriate time.
Great. Yeah, Marie, sorry for interrupting you there. Jump right back in.
It was a timely interruption.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was going to say that I think apps like CapCap are useful. So I think we should look into things like partnerships, because I mean, we do have existing, existing technology available that we could just capitalize on. And I actually have a question from someone. She's asking, Kay Hamilton, she's asking whether the data would be provided for free, which is a really crucial point when you're thinking about persons in rural areas. And you were saying, Mr. Sheridan, that they may not have, data all the time. They may not be checking their phones, And so I think that's a really good question.
Right, and I think I use the word information to be shared freely. I meant that in both senses, freely as in generously, but also freely without cost. Because if you make it, no matter how small the barrier, if you make it difficult for people to access information, that's a turn-off. And a lot of people will not bother, and of course will pay the consequences. So the information, if it's gathered, it should be made public as public knowledge without any hesitation.
There is an app that Maurice was referring to that Nemo uses here. What's it called, Maurice? What's it called?
CapCap.
CapCap, right. So I don't know how pervasive it is in terms of what's the penetration, how many people actually have it on their smartphones. I have it, and I find the bulletins that they put on it. We just had ELSA pass, and they were giving frequent updates on the passage of ELSA. What were the predictions and what was the warning level.
But Tony, these would be the same updates that we were getting constantly on email and on WhatsApp and so on as well. Correct.
But the CapCap, the smartphone app that Nemo has, alerts you. It's like an alarm, as it were. Anyway, we're 2 minutes away from the break, and I wanted to ask Beatrice just to respond a bit to Fisher's question as well, in terms of how can the private sector better be involved in getting and sharing the information. What's your thoughts?
I would agree. I would agree with Lizra on this one. I think that the Chamber of Commerce should really find the means first to do so, but hire someone really dedicated to that, because I think in the Caribbean we've been hit hard by hurricane and earthquake and so many disasters and hazards that we should definitely learn from it, and we should be the one providing the information. So I think we have to put some resources out to work on it. Yes.
Do you also think that it should be provided for free? And this question is to Liz as well. Do you think that it should be for free? Because I mean,
think it's a service to your member. Yeah, I think it's a service to your member. Even if we have to do the work to find the funding from international donors, but I think it should be a service that you offer to your members, because we always said that the private sector is the engine of the economy of a country. So we are the one that should provide them with all the information for them to be prepared.
Yeah.
So I think it should be free.
You mentioned funding, and because there's a cost to everything, right? The information
There's a
collection
cost to
will have a
everything. If you
cost
hire
involved.
human
So I wanted to know
resources,
who will bear that cost.
yes, there is a cost. If you hire someone to be on top of getting the information and sharing the information, yes, it has a cost.
Okay, we're going to have to leave that exciting exchange there to go to the break. When we come back, we've got some comments in the Facebook and YouTube chat. So we're just going to take our first break here, and we come back with the comments in the chat feed.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Vincentions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosaint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosaint General Insurance Company.
Welcome back to Let's Get Down to Business. We are talking about disaster risk reduction and business continuity. Let me remind you that my panel is Beatrice Elias. She's the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Haiti. We have with us Liz Fabian, or Fabian. I think there must be two pronunciations to that name. She's the Executive Director of the Dominica Association of Industry and Commerce. Our own Joe Sheridan is here with us, anchored in St. Vincent. He is a chartered insurance practitioner, and co-hosting with me is Tifisha Telesford in Taiwan, early in the morning for her. And I also have in the room Maurice Franklin, who is a regular co-host. Folks, I did say I'll go to the comments, but I realized the comments, Joe, somebody just said, Daniel, whatever, said you were making a good point. And they were also telling us what the app was. Let's look at risk reduction. Let's jump straight into that. Let's look at state policies. What do you think our state policies are, what that exist now for disaster risk reduction? What specific current state policies exist? I'm going to start with Joe to get the St. Vincent context. And of course, Maurice, you can also jump in on this one.
Sure.
Joe?
All right. Yes, thanks. I think the first name, again, that comes to mind is NEMO, because their ambit is very wide. It's not reactive, but it's to manage risk in the widest sense. So they're heavily involved. Also, our physical planning department are very active. We know that. And there's something which is talked about, but which unfortunately is not enforced enough, perhaps, building codes. When we're talking of property. So those are the areas where we see government being very evident in disaster risk reduction planning. It's planning for it in advance. But I don't honestly see the private sector being consulted enough in regard to many of these. We're presented with these perhaps as a fait accompli. I think it would be great if we could be involved and make them better and make them stronger. Having laws and rules and building codes that are not being enforced is not going to solve our problems, I'm afraid.
So I must say that we don't have anybody at NEMO on this panel, Joe, so they can't defend themselves here, but or anybody from the state for that matter. But I think it's a good conversation piece in terms of where there might be gaps and where there are opportunities to involve the private sector. Beatrice, the Haiti is, in our perception, a disaster-prone area. You get earthquakes as well. That's not a common experience, and I'm talking about destructive earthquakes. It's not a common experience for us here at all. Dominica's had its share. What are the current state policies there that exist for disaster risk reduction?
Even if some exist, I have to admit that I'm not sure that they're being followed, because if I go right now on my terrace and I show you Haiti, you will see that unfortunately construction regulations are not being observed, and everybody, well, some buildings are they have a special exam and they have everything. They go through a very specific study for to resist earthquake, but otherwise some of the houses are being built without any prevention, no rules, no regulation, and nothing. They're supposed to have what they did. The Ministry of Commerce put some state policies on material to be imported, such as iron, wood, cement, and stuff like that. But some merchandise come across the border and with no control. So there are some, let's say that you have some state policies into place, but I cannot say that they're being followed.
So, and back across the border, you mean coming from
Dominican Republic? Yes.
Yeah. Lizra, what's the Dominica position on state policies?
Well, it's quite similar to that of St. Vincent. Looking at the building codes and the other codes that exist. There was something that's done differently since Hurricane Maria, because we try to see how we can learn from that terrible experience that we had. So the Climate Resilience Execution Agency of Dominica, it's called CREED. It was established after Hurricane Maria to help Dominica to be more climate resilient. And with this organization, they are putting some measures in place and working with different stakeholders to help us to be more resilient and to reduce our risk of disasters. In terms of the other policies, there are certain things that are being worked on, such as the physical planning, resilient plan for Dominica and other plans, but it's still a work in progress. I can't report and say they actually did specific a completed DRR policy in place, but we're trying to see how we can learn from the terrible experiences.
And to Joe's point, Joe was making the point about the private sector not being involved enough in influencing the policy, influencing risk management policy. Is that a factor in Dominica and in Haiti?
Well, to an extent, we're involved in influencing policy because the Chamber of Commerce is always even invited to provide input and feedback into the policy. But in the real sense of it, we are not involved enough as we should, meaning that sometimes we're not invited to the table early enough to make the contributions early enough, as opposed to just giving feedback on a policy. But the Chamber of Commerce is definitely willing, and all the private sector members, to provide input to policy.
And Beatrice?
I would answer the same as Lizra. Unfortunately, too many times we're not invited to the table.
So I'm going to spin this a little bit, because I am the executive director of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce here. I do get a lot of invitations from NEMO to participate in quite a wide-ranging set of dialogue sessions that they have, and some about, I guess, leading up to making policy. And when I try to invite my members, there's some inertia. So I'm just wondering if the private sector itself, yes, we're making the point that they're not involved, but if invited to, will they actually show the interest and participate? I've had a mixed response here in St. Vincent. I'm not knocking anybody. I mean, every time something like this comes, yes, I see Joe in the conversation, But Joe, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Is the
Sure.
private sector, are they themselves sufficiently driven to, take an interest in being part of policy making?
Well, I will add to that.
Of course. Carry on. Sorry.
Okay, sure. I will add to that, even similar to you, Tony. I mean, sometimes there are some members who are interested, or some persons within the private sector who are interested, and others who are not. I think part of our responsibility is to try to find different ways. I mean, and even though we try to find different ways, everyone will still not come on. But there must be a coalition of the willing, like we say, even if it's 5 businesses, 10 businesses, there's a coalition of the willing to help to work for, like, to move forward. And some businesses, they wait until things are happening for them to get on. So hopefully when they see that things are progressing and others are contributing and their voices are being heard and progress is being made, then hopefully they will also join in that process.
Right. Tony, is it your experience that the only persons that are expressing interest are those who are directly affected by the particular the reason for the meeting, whatever the consultation is? In other words, the general membership doesn't turn out, just the ones that are specifically interested. So that's self-interest. So in a way, to appeal to people's self-interest and show them that it's in everybody's self-interest to come and have a voice around the table, because that's the only way that influencing will happen.
And I mean, self-interest in terms of incentive for them to be present. And you're right, Joe. So at these meetings, you would see the telecoms company, the electricity company. Well, you know, the telecoms, they've got lots of infrastructure out there that, and they also participate in recovery efforts, communications, big thing. So they're obviously there. Supermarkets are generally represented because, at those dialogue sessions, but it's the small business. These are the ones I find not participating enough.
Well, then they would probably need to feel that their views are being given respect and that they're being listened to and they can make a difference. Because if they attend some of these sessions and find that they're not being given any consideration, then they won't come again, and they will also talk to other members, and it'll never get better. So there does have to be a two-way street. If you're inviting people to the party, you've got to be able to listen to them and give them respectful listening.
That's a very good point. So, Tifisha and Maurice, anything you want to add at this point?
I would like to ask you, Tony. Maurice, you go first.
No, I was going to say, I think from, how do I put it? An investor standpoint, I think their position is very different. You know, I find that we don't have a lot of legislation requiring or regulations requiring, for example, an environmental impact assessment before you come and plop down your business, or there's nothing to sort of ensure that you are protecting the climate or anything like that. You know, it's more like, okay, well, I'll give you a tax break and you can come here. And then, so what are we doing to preserve in terms of, if you're looking at continuity and you're looking at factors that contribute to the very same disasters that you're trying to prevent or to deal with, there's nothing of that sort here. I don't find we have enough, or it's not strong enough.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there are environmental impact assessment studies that are done.
They're not required, though. I'm looking at the legislation right now. It's not required. They can ask for it, but it's not.
That's fine. So it needs to be strengthened by the legislation. I'll take that point. But I know that they are requested. The study itself, does it actually cover, a wider range of issues? Meaning, when you look at the environmental impact, are we capturing everything that we need to be concerned about? I think we need to examine that as well. But that's a good point you make, Maurice. If it's not legislated, then then that's an issue. Tifisha, you were
So
going to say
my
something.
question to you, Tony, because you said even when invited, some businesses, they don't take the opportunity to come to the table and discuss. So I was wondering if it's similar to what maybe Joseph or Joe suggested, that is it that the smaller business you find are the ones that don't take the invitation? And also, why do you think they're not coming to the table? Do you think they have some limitations and they need particular help, some problems that maybe they don't share? Those are my questions for you. And
yeah, I mean, yes, I think a lot of the times we are dealing with small businesses that are invited to meetings during business hours. Okay, so are they going to leave their business to come to a meeting? That may be a factor. Okay, they're not sufficiently staffed. And what I've found, Tifisha, is sometimes when they do participate, the person that they send is not a decision maker. It's not a senior person, so they're just sending a representative for representation's sake, okay? And that's not really it, is what's required as well. In terms of the way of engagement, I think we can be more creative here, how we engage the people that we want to have dialogue with. Maybe we're too stuck on just getting into a meeting room and pulling their thoughts out. So I think that's another part of it. And my final point is that I think there's just some inertia as well. I think people don't see the benefit. They don't think that it's going to be taken care of anyway. Okay, so there's that. But Beatrice, I want to pull you in and Lizra in on this point as we're discussing this about the benefit to the private sector to participate. I think Lizra contributed here already, but Beatrice, what do you think happens in Haiti?
I would say that in Haiti, unfortunately, everybody's taking care of his own business and doesn't always see the bigger picture, the bigger picture. So that's a problem. It's always responding to an emergency with no plan into place. So that's a problem. So they will participate if they're concerned, but in the meantime, they will take care of something else.
I want to go on that point that Marie's brought up about the environmental impact assessment. And as far as investors are concerned, and other, not just foreign investors, but people, private sector that are embarking on big projects that are, we need to understand how it's going to impact the environment. What is the situation in Dominica? What's your legislation like in Dominica, Israel?
In terms of the use of the environmental impact assessment?
Yeah, is it legislated or is it just something that you request that you don't like?
I feel it to be legislated because there are some businesses who may not necessarily implement it, but I've seen when there are clearly big projects in Dominica, and for even example, the World Bank is having a project, or even the geothermal plant that's being built. This project, we definitely see impact assessments, environmental impact assessments being done. The airport that's taking place. So the many businesses who support these big projects, well, definitely the environmental impact assessment would be done. In terms of the smaller projects, if persons may not necessarily have that oversight, then we'd certainly not see that being implemented.
Well, and Marie's, you may want to comment here. For example, and I'm not even talking about disasters and such events, but I'm just talking about practices, farming practices, pig farming, whatever, what seeps into the water table, what gets into the rivers, all of those things. I think we have a lot of work to do. I know efforts are made, but I think we have a lot of work to do. Let's move on and talk about preparedness, forecasting, and planning. Are you satisfied with the current tools and models used to forecast natural hazards?
Tony, I'm glad you asked me, because I had scribbled down earlier on for my own help. Models are models. That's what they are. That they're not perfect. And I can quote you exactly the words of a Lloyd's underwriter in 2017. By the way, I'm still wearing my green thing that says Dominica's Solidarity from 2017 on my wrist there. What the words were was, Hurricane Maria was not supposed to happen according to the models. And so you see, if you have the wrong model, or if the model is not good enough for the job, you will get an answer which isn't perfect. And if you rely on that totally, you can be in big trouble. So I think, I don't know how good our current tools and models are, but they can never be good enough. They have to be constantly upgraded. I remember going to a Caribbean Disaster Management Conference 2010, I think it was, in Jamaica, and like a whole day was taken up with people presenting 15 minutes on their computer models, their particular models that they got, and they were each one was saying why they were the best one, and they were all vying with each other for competition. So there were so many models out there. Let's make sure we get the right ones.
It's an interesting point. It's a work in progress, but it'll be interesting to hear from Beatrice, and I'm particularly keen to know how you operate with earthquakes being a constant threat there, and that's from experience. You've had them, so it's not a question of if you've not had the experience of earthquakes. You think that you've got right sort of technology there that can give people a ample warning? I know within the limitations of what's technically possible.
I wouldn't say technical issues, because even anybody in Haiti has a phone or a smartphone, and they can receive a text message or WhatsApp, or it's not the problem. The problem is the way everybody live, and the fact that all houses are just piling up, and there's, like I said, there's no regulation. So that's my only concern, is that I don't think that we've learned from the earthquake.
Interesting.
That's the biggest problem.
Liz,
the private sector.
Sorry, go ahead.
The private sector had put structure into place, but besides that, the environment, nothing has been done, and that's the major problem. That's a major concern, because they represent the employees most of the time.
Liz, do you get any surprises in Dominica? Are you given ample warning, and you're satisfied that the models for doing so are sufficient and adequate?
Well, I would not say it's adequate. For sure, I wouldn't say it's adequate. Case in point with Hurricane Maria, even up to an hour before, we were not aware that it was going to be so severe, and I know things change rapidly. That's one of the things that we see. And even last week with Tropical Storm Elsa, by the time it was passing us, was Tropical Storm Elsa, then moving to Hurricane Elsa. I think some of the information, it was still unpredictable at certain times, and it was not sufficient information in order to plan properly. I think within our region, early warning systems is definitely an area that we need to improve on. And even how the information is communicated based on the results from the early warning system, that's really important for us to make better decisions as a private sector.
So it may be that the early warning systems are there, and it's communicated maybe to some parties of interest, but there's not enough. The communication is not wide enough and specific enough, wide-reaching and specific. Maybe that's communication may be a factor. Do you see that, Israel?
Well, I would say for the early warning system, some of it is centralized for the Caribbean or maybe decentralized in certain points. So within the OECS or those closer to Barbados, some of the information comes out from that area. And once it's communicated through to, well, the government decides to communicate to the general public, I think the information flow is, it's satisfactory in terms of that. But in terms of making the decision, case in point last week, we had Hurricane Elsa, and we would see that the island above had a warning, or sorry, a watch, and the island below had a warning, but Dominica had no information. So in cases like that, I would say it's certainly not adequate in being able to make the decisions quick enough.
Maurice, we got some things in the chat. You wanna pull them up?
Yeah, we have mostly comments, but we have a question from Daniel Campbell. He's asking whether there are any incentives for businesses to have a business continuity plan or any emergency preparedness plan in place.
I can help in that one. From the insurance perspective, there are incentives, not so much for the plans, but for the specifics. Insurance companies would love to give discounts, and this is a way of attracting good quality business. So if you've got not just a plan, but you've got, let's call it an active plan, you're making physical precautions, for example, part of it. For example, I spent some time over this weekend working on shutters. Changing the shutters. So things like that, insurance companies will give incentives, but it has to be a two-way street. Perhaps that government could give incentives as well on the importation of things which are going to help to reduce or manage risks. And that would be a good two-way street where government and the insurance sector would be working together. And the private sector, of course, would benefit because they'd be selling these items which are going to benefit and reduce risk as well.
It's a very valid point.
Yeah, could I come in on this one?
Sure, Israel.
I think one of the main, maybe I'm biased to this information, but one of the main incentives is a business being able to start up as quickly as possible. And the main incentive and the benefit is for the business using that plan. So if there's no plan, it makes it more difficult for that business to start up after, and just to be able to serve customers, get revenue, and continue the life of the business. But also in advocating for businesses to have business continuity plans or emergency plans. I'm happy that Joe mentioned about the discounts for insurance. And also if businesses possibly need to get grants from the government, it would be good that some of the funding or special incentives would be tied to these. Also, if the government is giving certain special concessions, maybe it should be directed to, maybe I'm biased in this, reward the businesses who actually try to limit or reduce their risk so that they can continue to help to build the country.
Great, yes, totally agree with that. At some point, Tony, the subject of business interruption insurance should come up as well. But this is reactive after the fact, but the concept of trying to get the businesses back and running is great. It may be of interest that after the volcanic eruption, which we're still coming to the end of at the moment, so many persons were sending in supplies into St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And that was great, very, very generous. But wiser heads did speak to us, and I'm talking Rotary here, from a worldwide basis, and they said, please, if you can, ask people to send in money. As long as your ports are open, which they were, we were getting supplies. We were receiving supplies, but also our the fact was that the money which was being sent in would keep our economy alive. It will be spent.
That's a very good point you're making, Joe, and it's something that the chamber was quietly mentioning to the minister economic planning, quietly about the shift of emphasis to really, and I think, in all fairness, I think I heard the government asking more for financial donations to be sent there, easier to deal with. Plus,
Will be spent in this economy. Yes.
Your point about the money being spent in this economy is there's a balance. You don't want to shut down people's goodwill, but we in the private sector we have to make sure that those quotations don't undermine our own business.
Right. They can show us. We can show them how they can help us better that way.
Correct. We're right up on the break. So we'll go to it now. When we come back, Mauricio will tell me what other comments there are in the chat, and then we'll continue the discussion. Joe, I think you'll be interested to know that we're going to move right into the financial protection side of things. And I think insurance is going to be a big part of the discussion here. So,
can I add something, Tony, please, before
sure,
the financial
quickly.
part? I was,
Yes.
I couldn't say it better, Lizra, and thank you for that. I think that business continuity plan should actually be part of a business plan because it's a long-term vision. It should be part of a business.
So in other words, if you're presenting your business plan to a financial institution, for example, to raise money, if it doesn't have a component with business continuity in there, then it's considered incomplete. That's what you're saying.
I think so, yes.
Great.
I think that we should learn the lesson and really think about it and see things differently, definitely.
Okay, good. Folks, this is ideal time to go to our final break. When we come back, we'll be in the last session of this very interesting discussion on disaster risk reduction and business continuity. Let's take a break.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Vincentions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosaint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosaint General Insurance Company.
Welcome back, and we are into our final 30 minutes or so of this edition of Let's Get Down to Business. Maurice, I think I'm seeing Daniel Campbell with a couple more questions there. I don't know if you want to pull them out and some comments.
Well, several comments, but I would pull out the question. He was asking whether there are any private or public sector entities or initiatives set up to train businesses to develop a business continuity plan.
Can I answer that one?
Go ahead, Beatrice.
Last year, because of the pandemic, we had a very good relationship with ACTEMP. ACTEMP does exist in the Caribbean, in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's the association. Daniel, you should reach out to them, and they might help you and propose a different business continuity plan.
Joe, I know you know of the existence of at least one company. I don't want to necessarily give them some advertisements, but I think there are a couple. I know of at least one private sector entity here that is in that space in terms of helping businesses to plan for disaster preparedness and business continuity. But Joe, I don't know if you want to comment further.
Sure. Yes. Like you, I know of entities that have helped the Chamber in having workshops and so on, and that has to happen more and more as people realize the life or death issues that is the difference between survival or collapse of your business. So I think it's more and more important. There are entities that will provide this service. There are entities which provide it as part of their normal service as well. So I do think that it's an important area that people should have going forward. One of the things that would come particularly is that if persons are talking about business interruption insurance, that is something which, well, if usually business interruption is something which insurance brokers get involved with. So it's mainly businesses that are using the services of a broker. So they would get free business continuity information at the same time as setting up their business interruption insurance. Tony, would it be opportune just to list the benefits of what used to be called loss of profits insurance and is now called business interruption insurance?
Very opportune, and that takes us right into the financial protection segment that I promised to get into the last segment.
There is one thing I wanted to add though to that before we segue into the financial aspect. In terms of the business continuity plan and the support that's available.
Yes, go ahead, Elizabeth.
So CARICHAM, I'm not sure if you mentioned that part before, but CARICHAM has a network of Caribbean Chambers of Commerce. We are finalizing a BCP guide and template for businesses across the Caribbean. And these would specifically or firstly target the members of our Chambers of Commerce who would be interested in using this guide and this template. We're still in the process of finalizing, and even this coming week, we're supposed to meet to finalize the final draft of that. So hopefully during the month of July, we'll be able to launch this across the Caribbean for businesses through the Chambers of Commerce. So hopefully this can even support the St. Vincent Chamber of Commerce in providing onward support to its members and businesses in St. Vincent.
So I think I need to just understate or underpin what you've just said, that CARICHAM is actually the official body of the network of Chambers of Industry and Commerce in the Caribbean region. We're actually inclusive of CARICOM and some members outside of CARICOM. The three executive directors on this chat, myself included, are members of CARICHAM. Beatrice is a member of CARICHAM, representing the Haiti Chamber of Commerce, and Lizra was the past chairperson of CARICHAM. Not too long. She was the first chairperson, I should mention, and plays a very active role. So yes, Joe, let's segue into your
Sure.
benefits
All right.
that you wanted to put up.
But I'm fascinated to hear about the CARICHAM aspect, because I think that's great and not before time. Just to give you an idea, I walked with our own business continuity plan. I can hold it there. I don't know if it can be seen, but it now has 13 pages. Now, when we wrote our first business continuity plan, it had 2 pages. Things change, things develop, and you learn more, and you capture more things that are important as you go along. So a business continuity plan shouldn't be one thing that's prepared and put in a drawer or a shelf and left there. It should be constantly in front of you and updated constantly with developments. So let's very, very briefly summarize the sort of things that are covered under what used to be called loss of profits insurance. Now, we know that not all businesses make profits. So it has properly been called business interruption insurance, and that's a much better title, because it's not just talking about covering you for the loss of the profit that you should have made, but it also covers the extra costs to relocate, the extra costs to continue. Oh, sorry, you will still have some ongoing costs that you'll incur anyway. So those costs can be paid for, can be covered. The extra costs, as we said, of relocating, it may cost you a lot of money to set up somewhere else and keep going in a different way. There are other expenses that you may not have thought of, and there are different ways of setting up your insurance, but the best way is to make provision for the things that you haven't thought of. So you exclude certain costs that you definitely don't need. For example, if you're out of action for 6 months or a year, you won't have an electricity cost, for example. So you could reduce the insurance by excluding things like that. But apart from that, what about your wages? Most businesses have some really good employees that they want to hold on to. And if they let them go, then they wouldn't get them back when they're up and running. So the business interruption insurance includes provision for that.
So, Joe, let me interrupt you here. Would that have, if I had a business interruption insurance plan, would that have kicked in with the COVID pandemic? And is there a, certainly can't go for an indefinite period. So I mean, it can't be. The point I'm getting at here is an interruption, and an interruption probably has a start and an end, right?
Yes.
So I want some clarity on that.
With a business interruption insurance, you choose the period of time that you want to be covered for after the event has happened. So if we take a simple example, if you have your various insurances at different times during the year, if you have a policy that has a 12-month indemnity period, and it happens on, say that on the 4th of July, you have a hurricane, an earthquake, a volcanic eruption, a fire, a tsunami, etc., that wipes you out, the clock starts ticking. And at the end of 12 months, you and your accountants and your financial advisors sit down with your insurance brokers or your insurance company and thrash out the figures that show what your situation has been in that last 12 months compared to what you were projected to be. And the intention is that the insurance will pay the difference. So it has a finite period. It's called the indemnity period that you choose. In regard to the COVID question, that's a wonderful question, because that has arisen a lot in recent times. It all depends on the wording of the policy that you've got. Most policies do not cover infectious diseases or loss of business interruption from infectious diseases, but some do. And a lot will depend on the type of business that you're in and the size of your business, because it is something that has not been available for everybody. For example, a large resort might automatically want coverage like that for infectious disease, but a small regular business, a small factory and something, may not be particularly concerned about it. And the price will be charged accordingly. But what it can do is also, interestingly, to cover you for prevention of access to your place. For example, you don't have to be physically damaged. You could have, just like the COVID, you're not physically damaged, you're financially damaged, but because people can't get to you.
Right. So I get the concept.
As a result of something happening to someone nearby, for example.
Yeah.
So
I get it.
Say you're in an area where you're one road in, one road out. You're at the end of the line. You have a very, very great business, and people come in and go all day long. But the person at the head of the line, let's say, has a fire, and the road is blocked. Everything is blocking the road. You're out of action for maybe 3-4 months.
Correct.
People don't get you. So you can be covered for things like that. You can also be covered for losses if the damage takes place to your major supplier or to your major customer. You're not damaged physically, but financially you are hit for 6.
Joe, I'm going to have to push on. It's
Sure.
a point that we can get bogged down on, but very, very interesting point to the discussion. Anyway, I see we have a comment from Lucy in the comments field. Comment or question?
It was a question. She was asking whether pandemics would be among acts of God or close to them in terms of exclusions from being covered by the insurance.
Okay, I can happily explain that. The term acts of God has been thrown out by the professional insurance market. It was too vague. It allowed people to hide behind things, and it didn't serve any purpose except negative. So in recent times, the insurance industry has adopted a format called contract certainty, which means they say exactly what they cover and exactly what they don't. So the answer to the question is, as I said earlier on, pandemics have been covered around the world by certain policies. It depends on the policy you've got. Not every policy was including infectious diseases and pandemics and so on, but some have, and some people have been paid around the world. So that's good news, but it wouldn't be available for small businesses. It would be mainly for large businesses that would be affected by something like that.
And
So,
we
Joe-
had a question about whether business interruption insurance is parametric in nature and how long after disruption it would take to activate in general in St. Vincent.
I'm delighted to hear that, because I've been itching to talk about parametric insurance. The answer is no, it's not parametric at the moment. Parametric is a non-traditional way of doing insurance.
What is parametric?
Okay. Let me just explain the traditional, and then I'll show you how the parametric works. Traditional insurance, you insure for a certain amount, and something happens, and you assess what the damage is, the cost of the damage, whether it has to be repaired, replaced, and so on, and you claim that amount against the insurance, and the insurance will decide whether or not they're going to pay you the full amount, or whether there's any reason that they should change that, and so on. So, for example, if you have a fire, parametric approaches it differently. Parametric says simply, you can pay as much insurance as you want to into this particular insurance, but the payout depends on the happening of an event. So the first parametric insurance that was set up was wind-based. So if you're, a tropical storm is, it cuts in at 74 miles an hour, I think that's correct. And it goes up category 1, 2, 3, 4. A tropical storm starts lower than that, up to 74 when it becomes a hurricane category 1. So the insurance would be event-based. So if the event happens that you're insured against, you get paid out. And you get paid out according to, if it's wind speed you're talking about, as to whether it's a tropical storm or a category 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, or in the future 6 and 7. We have to be starting looking ahead. So the parametric insurance pays out so much according to how much you've chosen, you've paid in, according to what event has happened. Now you get that money in your hand, and you don't have to wait. It's paid out quickly, and you don't have to wait, and you don't have to spend it in any particular way.
So is there a damage assessment?
No, and that's the great thing, because immediately the event becomes public knowledge. Everyone knows that Hurricane Elsa was here on, gosh, today's Sunday, only Friday, yeah. Right? Yes, and everyone knows that that was a hurricane. It's common knowledge. So if we had parametric insurance that covered that, I know the government does have what's called CRIF, which is the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, and that pays out a certain amount according to the wind speed. Now, at the same event that I attended more than 10 years ago, the Disaster Management Conference, I picked up on the fact that they were talking of wind speed only. And I said, wait a minute, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and of course, Haiti and Dominica,
we'll talk about
can be totally so that our worst threat is not a fast hurricane like Elsa yesterday at 28 miles an hour. It is a slow-moving tropical storm which could dump millions of gallons of rain on St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Haiti and Dominica, and cause landslides and flooding and disaster. And so that is how the parametric insurance has been extended to include what they call excess rainfall. And I know that St. Vincent and the Grenadines has that as well.
I want to invite Beatrice and Elizabeth to share the Dominica perspective as far as insurance, or the Dominica experience, as far as what insurance types of insurance exist, what and that the private sector can access in terms of disaster financial protection.
Well, for our businesses, even through the chamber, we held a session on insurance 2 weeks ago, and we looked at the different types of insurance, which includes business interruption insurance. We're looking at property insurance, health, life, some of what seem basic, but it's for looking at the specific type of needs of the businesses. I'm happy that you brought up parametric insurance. I don't have to explain it again, but since Hurricane Maria, there was a new pilot of parametric insurance in Dominica this year, where the same Climate Resilience Execution Agency of Dominica, together with the Cooperative Societies League of the credit unions, they piloted this parametric insurance for businesses and even residential property homeowners. They'll be able to put up a certain amount of money, and if we have, let's say, a hurricane category 3, it would pay out the business based on business or homeowner, based on the amount of investment they put in the parametric insurance. So that's something new. I think after this year, based on the pilots and the results from it, we could possibly see a lot more businesses going that way.
Yes, Tony, could I add to what Liz was saying there? Because it's a great idea. We are fascinated by that, and we are anxious to know more. It's being as well at the present time, the same concept. And what we are learning is that the majority of persons who have expressed interest are farmers, because generally there is no crop insurance except for bananas.
Yeah.
But this would be an opportunity for farmers growing other kinds of produce to get insurance to cover
based on events.
That's right, to cover what would be a disaster for them.
Yes,
if their crop is wiped out and so on, they would love that kind of insurance, and that's something we've already discussed at the Ministry of Agriculture level as well over the last few years. So it's a fascinating development, and we are sure that that's the way forward. So I'm glad that Lizra brought that aspect up very much.
So Beatrice, I'm going to go to you and then see if Tafisha wants to jump in after that with any questions or comments she may have. You've got parametric insurance in Haiti. Is that it?
Not that I know of. Most of the businesses are using private insurance company, and so unfortunately, I never heard about parametric insurance before, I have to admit. But
so just regular coverage.
Yeah, they do have like I said, they do contract insurance, private insurance, but nothing with
right to cover against just general hazards.
Yes, and along the
Tony,
years, the policies are changing. As a matter of fact, they're evolving.
Okay.
Yes. That's great. Tony, if I could just add to what's being said by Lizra and Beatrice, then one of the problems with traditional insurance is something that you mentioned, I think, Tony. You talked about damage assessment. One of the biggest problems throughout the region is under-insurance, when you're talking about property insurance in particular. And so many persons insure, but they don't service their insurance. They don't upgrade it as it goes along. And so as a result, when a claim arises, their claims get cut down. And that's tragedy, because you're getting hit twice. You've already got a disaster on your hands, and then on top of that, your insurance doesn't pay out the full amount. So that is an area where I'm sorry to say many people are learning by the experience, and it is an area where we need to work on education. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank has Financial Information Month every year, and they try hard to educate people on avoidance of underinsurance. That's an area that really we can't talk enough about. Not today, though.
Yes, Joe, I was going to say, it seems like CARICHAM needs to pull you in as an advisor on insurance, but that will be getting your services pro bono, of course.
But we don't charge fees, you know that. It's free.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Tafisha, I don't know if you want to jump in at this point. We're coming down on our home stretch here. We're into the last 5 minutes, actually, of the program.
I would just like to ask for the Chamber of Commerce, do you think that businesses that engage with you if you think they're properly insured, and if they see the need for the insurance, and if they know what kind of insurance they should have, and if they're properly educated on that.
So Beatrice?
Yes, they are definitely. Yes.
And Lizra?
And for us, I would say more businesses are learning more about what is expected of them. And even from our experience, we've seen that some persons may have not want to pay the full amount, so they reduce the value of their property, but they would realize that if an event happens, they're on the short end of the stick. So many businesses are learning how to improve their decisions in accessing and being insured.
But that's great, actually, Lizra, because the one thing that everyone has is a budget, and the budget is usually tight. There's not very much money available. So what we have found as insurance brokers is that when people come to people like us, we are able to find a way to make it possible for them to insure within their budget. There are ways to do it legally. But very often people take the shortcut that you mentioned. They insure for less because they think that it'll save them money. But then when they have a claim, they unfortunately they pay for that at that time. It's payback time.
Okay, we have one question from Daniel again. I think this is the last question we could take before we get the final comments from our panelists. So, Maurice, I don't know if you want to read that question for us.
He's asking whether there are micro insurance schemes available for agriculture, fisheries, etc. And he's commenting that there are some initiatives in Dominica led by CREAD and other entities, but he's not sure about SVG and Haiti. I think that's a valid point, especially when we were talking earlier about the rural, areas and the
rural economy.
Yeah.
2 years ago, we talked with the ministry. And at their request, and the farmers were very much. It was throughout the Ministry of Agriculture, but certainly the farming community were well represented and very vocal, and they were looking for insurance for agriculture beyond bananas. So they're looking for it, and I hope that the ministry is still willing to reconsider that or to raise it again, because it seems to have gone quiet in recent times.
But sadly, we are actually at the end of the program. We're going to take some final last comments from our panelists. I'm going to start with you, Beatrice, and you've got about 45 seconds just to leave some final thoughts on the whole thing about disaster risk reduction and business continuity.
Thank you, Tony. I would say that I think this is definitely the something that the Chamber of Commerce should take on, because everybody's concerned, and like I said, the private sector is the engine of the economy. So I think it's part of our responsibility to educate people and be on the outlook of opportunities to make things better and offer better financial and insurance and everything that we can offer our members.
And Lizra, thank you, Beatrice. Lizra, final comments, 45 seconds.
Yes, I do agree with Beatrice that the private sector is the engine of growth, no matter how small our private sector is. And there are steps that our private sector can take to reduce our risk of disaster and to help our businesses continue. Whether it's a short one-page business continuity plan, meaning like, how am I going to protect my people, my processes, my profits, and other parts of the business, but we can take some small step to make sure businesses can continue. Reach out to CARICHAM, reach out to your Chamber of Commerce, get the information there, get the support, and help your business continue as long as possible.
Well, Joe, I have to cut you down to 30 seconds.
No trouble.
Which I don't know if it's possible.
I'll try. Let me endorse everything that Beatrice and Lizra have said. I endorse those fully. Let me just focus then on insurance. Please don't look only at the price. Look at the coverage you're getting, look at the strength and security of the insurance company, and look at the reputation. So look at all of those issues in terms of getting value for money. And if you're not sure, ask for advice. There's free advice available throughout the country. Tony, I think I got within my 30 seconds.
You did very well. I want to thank everybody who's followed this program on YouTube, on Facebook, who've been viewing IKTV on behalf of my co-host, Tifisha Telesford in Taiwan, and Maurice Franklin, who's right here in St. Vincent. Morales is in the production room, Morales Harry. I want to thank him. And of course, my panelists for joining in this lively and timely discussion. Join us again on Let's Get Down to Business. I want to pre-advertise that next Sunday, we'll be doing our first profile, business profile, or profiling a business person. This is a new addition to the program. So let's get down to business. Will, from time to time, profile a business person. We're going to start off next week with Mr. Basil Charles. So thank you again and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Vincentions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.